Well, good afternoon, colleagues. And as we say in South Africa, lockdown greetings. It's good to see familiar faces on the screen, but under very different and difficult circumstances. And I'm hoping that all of us will certainly be able to, not too long from now, be physically able to interact with each other. Our presentation, I'm hoping, covers all of the areas. I have made some changes in terms of the formulation, but I think to give you a context, the South African experience is a different one, to the extent that on the 5th of March we detected our first case, and it's as a result of a 38-year-old male that traveled from Italy with his wife, returned on the 1st, and a few days later was tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. 10 days later, that figure of 1 moved very quickly to 61. Fortunately, still no deaths, but the government stepped in with the President of the Republic declaring a national state of disaster. And with that came a number of stringent measures, including no meetings to take place where there's more than 100 people. In the South African context, that is an impossibility for many meetings. We hold big meetings in the country. So that placed a serious difficulty on the convening of meetings across government itself, but also within the public space. 8 days later, that figure moved to 402. Still, fortunately, no infections, no deaths. But the government felt it was best to go on a total lockdown. So for the last 2 weeks, we've been under a national lockdown. We have 7 days left of that national lockdown. And there are very serious stringent measures that have been introduced, which includes no one leaving their homes unless it is necessary. But for our municipalities, there are huge obligations that have been placed on them, because essential services must still continue to be delivered. And we have a huge homeless population, and an obligation was placed on our municipalities to provide accommodation, housing for those homeless people. So people had to be moved overnight from the streets into formal accommodation. So 2 weeks into the lockdown, we are currently sitting at just under 1,800 infections. And in fact, when I presented this presentation yesterday, we were at 13 deaths. Today, when I woke up, we are now sitting at 18 deaths, so 5 overnight deaths since I've submitted this presentation. So that is really where we find ourselves. What have we done as an association? If we can move to the next screen. What have we done as an association? Obviously, with our members, they asked us specifically to address some of the legislative requirements they are to meet. For instance, if there's a lockdown and you can't have meetings with more than 100 people, all of our metropolitan municipalities have councillors in excess of 100. So council meetings could not take place, but yet there are requirements that municipalities have to adopt their budgets, but also consult communities on those budgets. So we lobbied the national government to issue regulations that would assist municipalities not to meet those legislative requirements of meeting and approving certain things. But secondly, also, there has been a lot of financial obligations placed on municipalities to respond to the COVID-19 virus and its spread. And we have lobbied national government for funding mechanisms to assist municipalities to fund some of the costs. What we've also done in our respective provinces is that we have created communication platforms between ourselves, the municipal managers or city managers of the respective municipalities, and the mayors so that we on an ongoing basis communicate directly with the leadership in municipalities on what is happening, what some of the challenges are, so that we can address those at the national level. How we address those at the national level is the fact that the President of the Republic has created a national command center. We participate in that national command center and therefore are able to directly with national government raise issues that municipalities are experiencing difficulties with. And then we've also partnered with the private sector to come on board to assist our municipalities that were experiencing challenges in providing simple things, gloves, masks, sanitizers. They were unable to do so for a number of challenges, which I will come to in the next slide. So those are just some of the things we have been seized with. But I think there's a slide that has been skipped, which is the challenges slide. Some of the challenges our municipalities are experiencing, firstly, is that someone can just take us to that slide. The first challenge is around communication. With us being on lockdown, it's important that there's proper communication to communities. We have seen too many people communicating and contradicting each other, including national ministers being on national TV, contradicting each other on directives that have been given. So communication has been a challenge to communities. Secondly, I've touched on this point, funding, because overnight these obligations have been placed on municipalities and local authorities. It has placed them under tremendous financial pressure, and it is worsened by the fact that with a total lockdown, people are unable to go and pay for services. So municipalities are not collecting revenue because we still pay manually. So you pay over a counter. Because people can't go out of their houses, they can't go and pay. Municipalities are not collecting, so municipalities are under tremendous financial pressure. And then the third area relates to the point that I've made, just the personal protective equipment for our municipalities. Their stocks are low, so even before the lockdown, we had run out of gloves, masks, so you could not find a mask or gloves or sanitizers in the shops. And acquiring those have been serious difficulties. So those are some of the challenges that we are experiencing. In our view, the opportunities that exist, international solidarity opportunities, please go back to the previous slide, that exist are linked to these challenges. Certainly, getting personal protective equipment from outside of the country to South Africa would make a big difference to assist particularly our frontline staff in municipalities to be properly protected against getting the virus. And so that's an area we would certainly welcome. Secondly, also on funding, because of the pressures placed on local authorities with their limited resources, we would certainly welcome funding. And then the last part is because a large part of the country is rural, far-flung areas where it is difficult to get to and communicate with communities. Certainly we would have benefited from a communication tool to assist in spreading the message, particularly to those rural areas that have limited access to internet, cell phone networks, and that's an area of communication we would also have benefit from. The last slide, which deals with 6 months from now, well, certainly what we are seeing already is that there are improved working relations between municipalities and other spheres of government or other levels of government. There is certainly also improved relations between municipalities and the public sector. It is amazing how the private sector has come on board and assisting our municipalities to do a simple thing such as spreading the news around the virus, creating platforms for free to do so, but also where people, that's our difficulty with the lockdown, is access to food. We see a lot of private companies going out there providing food to these disadvantaged communities. We will also hope that from a funding point of view, there will be a review of funding mechanisms that will assist municipalities to be more responsible and more responsive, instead of the difficulty we currently have that to get funding, it's a cumbersome process and time consuming, and municipalities are expected to respond immediately. And the last one is that this disaster will certainly, similar disasters in the future. So we do think that some capacity is being built in the short term, and we hope that whilst with that capacity will be built, we are really hoping we will not need it in similar fashion going forward. And that's our input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lance. This is also very interesting. Last time we saw each other, we were in a different world. It's good to see you and to hear, about what's going on in South Africa. Just a few points I just want to highlight that you said that I thought, was extremely important. This idea of not losing sight of the most vulnerable populations, the homeless people. Many people are also asking that we bring a sort of a gender lens into the situation, making sure that we pay special attention to the segment of the population that we know will be is the most affected and will be the most affected in the future. So I think this is extremely important for all of us to keep in mind. As you said, one of the key in all of this is the access to financial resources. Many of our local governments and many of our local government associations, even before the crisis, had issues in terms of accessing funding. This is going to be strained even more. So I think our work, collective work in advocating, for proper resources to be provided to local government is even more important than before. I really like also, your views about what would be useful in terms of international cooperation. Very, very practical. And I think, having equipment, helping with some funding and so on, helping with communication tools to be able to access, the segment of the population in more rural areas is very, very important. And finally, yes, we all hope that we're going to learn from this and how to respond even better in the time of crisis. As you know, many of you know, CIB was involved with other colleagues in the UCLG network on responding to crisis. And we do hope that we're going to learn from that one as well.